Today's chalice lighting is called As the Wild Wind Bites by Ben Soul. Let us hold a quiet moment together as our chalice is lit. As the wild wind bites, so does the still flame warm us. As the deep snow blocks our doors, so does the gentle flame bring us out. As the crackling cold air stops our breath, so does the radiant flame draw from us the words we need to give and to receive. Words of greeting, words of comfort, words of solace. Words to challenge our minds and words to bring us to action. Let us gaze upon this common flame so that we remember who we are and what we can do when we are together.
Now is our time for joys and concerns. So if you have a joy or a concern, please speak up and I will light a candle for you.
I'd like to light a candle for my friend Jan Ratola, who's to have surgery this week.
I'd like to light a candle. I'll wait till the candle's lit. I'd like to light a candle for Ripley Wilson, an AmeriCorps volunteer up at Antelope Butte, who one of her first days wrecked her ACL, MCL, and broke some bones, and she doesn't have insurance, and she's here in Sheridan, a long way from home.
Kara is nervous, but I'm excited that she will be vaccinated tomorrow. As law enforcement and a first responder, I'm really glad for her. I know she's nervous. She would have preferred to be a little later in the game, but it's still good news.
I'd like to light a candle for the healing of our nation because we are still going through some terribly trying and divisive times. May we heal.
I'd also like to light a candle for 2021. May it be better than 2020.
We could live one for, I just love getting to see all your faces so much.
Okay. For friendly faces then.
For friendly faces, for more of them as our nation heals, I hope.
Victor, please light a candle for the family of Tony Rice, who is one of a genre-changing guitarist who died a few days ago. He's going to be missed by a lot of people in the music world.
Thank you, Bill. All right, then I'll light one final candle for joys and concerns, unexpressed but felt in the heart. And I think we have a story next. So if there are any young people around, bring them closer to your device.
I'm on the story, right?
That is correct.
Okay. So, Emmett, the story today is actually one of my favorites. I heard it at the beginning of a TED Talk, of all places. A woman who told a really interesting story about embracing change, but the story is actually a Taoist story about a farmer, and it goes like this. There was once a farmer in ancient China who owned a horse. You are so lucky, his neighbors told him, to have a horse to pull the cart for you. Maybe, replied the farmer. One day he didn't latch the gate properly and the horse ran off. Oh no, what terrible news, his neighbors cried. Such terrible misfortune. Maybe, said the farmer. A few days later, the horse returned, bringing 6 wild horses with it. How fantastic! How lucky, his neighbors told him. Now you are rich. Maybe, said the farmer. The following week, the farmer's son was breaking in one of the wild horses when it kicked and broke his leg. Oh no, his neighbors cried. Such bad luck all over again. Maybe, the farmer replied. The next day, soldiers came and took all the young men to fight in the war. The farmer's son was left behind. You're so lucky, his neighbors cried. Maybe, said the farmer. What do you think, Emmett?
We were just thinking, I just asked him the same question. What do you think that means?
I think that they think he's lucky because his son isn't in danger and that he doesn't have to lose his son.
It's interesting though, right? Because the neighbors jump to either he's lucky or unlucky. But he doesn't seem to think either.
I think he's lucky.
Yeah? Because he gets to keep his kid?
Or do you think he's neither or both?
I think he's.
I don't know. It's a tough one.
I think he lives in the moment more than most of us manage. Well, thank you for listening.
Yes, thank you so much, Emmett. So now we turn to a moment of meditation. I will read a short number of words, and then we'll have a period of silence, and then we'll put up on the screen Spirit of Life, and we can sing that together. Feel free to sing from your house. So the meditation is called As the Year Winds Down, and it's by Mark Stringer. As the year winds down to its close, and we are submerged once again in the seasonal darkness we have come to know so well, we have reason to think back upon the year that was, if only because it will soon be gone. We think back to the friends we have made, the sorrow we have endured, the love we have found, the loneliness we have survived. We think back to the blessings of being forgiven and the gift we offered to ourselves when we forgave. We think back to those who listened to us in our times of need and the times we could have listened more. We think back to the things we traded for our time and to what we may have overlooked in the process. We think back to the times when we were afraid and uncertain, and we trudged ahead anyway. And the times when we were compassionate, when we could have been cold. In this season of still growing night, may we see more clearly against the dark backdrop of living the true light of our lives, the love we give to others, and the peace we nurture in ourselves.
Before I begin, I'm just going to make my announcement one more time in case I missed anyone. I would love for everyone to have a piece of paper and a pen or pencil during the sermon. We're going to do an activity. So, one of the things I learned in 2020 is the concept of resilience. Maybe learn isn't the right word. I knew the word, but I found a way to embrace resilience as a verb, resilience as an action and a state of being. I found my practice in resilience was something I deeply needed more of in 2020. Resilience is our capacity to recover. It is the human ability to become more than we are now, more than we ever thought possible. It is the human capacity not only to survive difficult things, but to learn and to grow from them. There is a certain elasticity to the human heart and mind. Pushed too far, we can snap. Pushed just enough and in just the right ways, we can stretch. This stretching allows us to make space for changes and new practices. There is a body of research on this phenomenon. It's called psychological resilience. In cognitive behavioral therapy, building resilience is a matter of mindfully changing basic behaviors and thought patterns. There are many models for building resilience, and I'll talk more about that later. The heart of what I want to talk about today is why we should embrace resilience, and why resilience matters when we talk about authority and leadership. How resilience relates to trauma. Recently, I watched a fantastic webinar on spiritual care with LGBT older adults. It was wonderfully done and full of great personal stories and experiences. It gave me a whole new perspective on what it means to come out. Hearing the stories of older LGBT persons gave me insight into barriers that exist for those who move into care centers or become dependent on others for care. Many of these individuals, given their age, were never out during their adult lives. Most have experienced a lack of societal acceptance, family rejections, fear over possible legal ramifications, and threats of physical harm. Some had no same-sex relationships and lived in solitude. Others lived lives of expectation, unable to be themselves and love who they were attracted to, only now finding the voice to express their truth. When moving into care centers, these individuals experience renewed fears of how their care will be handled if they come out. They may also experience a great deal of shame and trauma around the idea of being vulnerable about their sexuality. One particular statement struck me. The guest speaker of the presentation, Chaplain Hale Desidue, said, "Shame is trauma. Shame is trauma. Shame is experienced by almost everyone. Some situations, of course, are more profound than others with longer lasting impacts, but shame is almost entirely universal. If we embrace this statement, shame is trauma, we can also embrace an understanding that all persons have experienced trauma in their lives. If you have any background in counseling, nursing, or therapy, you're likely aware of what it means to assess someone. You might also be familiar with a trauma-centered approach to care. A trauma-centered approach is a program or a system that is trauma-informed. It means it realizes the impacts of trauma and understands potential paths to recovery. The system or program recognizes the signs and symptoms of trauma in their clients, families, and staff. It responds by fully integrating knowledge about trauma into policies, procedures, and practices. And that program, that system, it seeks to actively resist re-traumatization. A trauma-informed approach can be implemented in any type of service setting or organization, and is distinct from specific trauma interventions or treatments because we're not trying to heal the trauma. I realize this is a very long definition. So in summary, a trauma-centered approach recognizes the impact and presence of trauma in people's lives. By linking experiences of shame to trauma, a trauma-centered approach acknowledges that almost everyone experiences trauma. And most importantly, a trauma-centered approach aims to give everyone a system of care that is sensitive to and aware of the impact of that trauma on your lives. A trauma-centered approach does not try to resolve the trauma. You know what helps with trauma? Resilience. So how do we cultivate resilience? Instead of using an organization's list or training module on resilience, I have a couple ideas. I hope they might spark our conversation, and I hope you'll be able to personalize these ideas as we continue to talk. I'm going to try this like a guided meditation. So imagine you're standing in a beautiful garden. There are lush trees and shrubs that lean over the path. And there is every color of flower you can imagine. There are red and yellow roses. There are purple lilacs. There are blue irises and orange tiger lilies. You're standing at the edge of the path and you look down at your feet and you see a path of stepping stones, each surrounded by luscious, deep green moss. As you take in a deep breath, you step your right foot forward and you land on the first stone. This first stepping stone is personal accountability. Like the words of the Serenity Prayer, I accept the things I cannot change. Personal accountability is not a list of shoulds. It's not all the things you wish you were. It's not the things you wish you weren't or wish you could do. Accountability is simply being present to how things are, how you are. And to help with this, I have an activity. It's called a self-care dashboard. So we're going to take a step back, and I want you to grab your piece of paper. I think this is easier with Zoom because we're all like in our own spaces, so we know where our paper is. So on this piece of paper, depending on your artistic inclinations or abilities, you're gonna draw or write. And I say draw because sometimes sketching is actually easier when we're thinking about rough ideas of things. I want you to draw or write 5 things that you need in your life each week. And what I mean by this is maybe yoga is something you need in your week. Maybe remembering to take your meds is something you need in your week. Maybe you want or strive to eat at least 1 serving of fruit every day. Maybe you want to drink more water, or maybe you want to drink less coffee. So I'm going to give everybody like 3 to 5 minutes just to write or draw 5 things. All right, I'm going to give everybody like another 30 seconds. If you don't get it done, it's okay. You can work on it later, I promise. So for this segment, I always have you guys on gallery view so I can see everybody, but it might be easier to be on speaker view so you guys can see what I'm going to show you in your top right corner. So these things that we've written down, they're going to help us with our personal accountability. So what we did is create what I call a spiritual care dashboard. And so my dashboard isn't meant to be a to-do list, but instead a monitoring tool of how things are going for me this week. It allows me to take a step back, and I use it to understand why certain things haven't happened. Have I had not enough sleep? Have I had too many night meetings? And I use it to acknowledge what's going on with me. So I'm going to show you guys my dashboard, and I believe in pictures. So this is what my self-care dashboard looks like. And I am a little neurotic, so I have my daily and my weekly list. And this is my little yoga person. And this is my little, am I getting enough hugs? This is my reminder to drink water. This is my little 3 servings of vegetables and my 1 serving of fruit. This is my less coffee because I would prefer like 9 cups. This is my reminder to think about how active I've been. And this is my reminder to try a vegetarian meal a week. And up here is my little pill bottle to take my meds every day. I watched a gentleman talk about his creation of this. And one of the things that he felt really great about it was that instead of thinking of this as a to-do list, he was able to embrace, and I started to embrace, rather than a like, oh, I didn't meet that goal in terms of when we think about like New Year's resolutions, I look at it as more of like your gas meter in your car going up and down. Like, well, this week I had 7 cups of coffee, but Kara woke me up in the middle of the night 5 times. So maybe that's why I gravitated towards more coffee this week. I found myself with COVID really wanting to embrace more meditation practices where I would literally take time to sit at my desk at work, turn off all the lights, and just listen to a few minutes of somebody reminding me to take a deep breath in. And when I look at this picture, I'm reminded, like, did I do that this week? Why didn't I do that? What was going on? Like, was there never any quiet? Was I too busy? Did I not make it a priority? So that's the idea of this. Does anybody want to show what they drew or why? It's up to you. Everybody's like, no, I don't want to show mine. It's okay if you don't. We can always talk about it at the end too. So now that we've done that, I'm going to ask us to go back to our walk. So we're going to take a deep breath in, and we're going to smell the roses on the right. And when you're ready, you're going to lift your left foot and move to the next stepping stone. We'll call this one your beliefs. The foundation of resilience isn't having the right beliefs, but knowing what your beliefs are. When we know what we believe, it can help us be less reactive to others. Knowing our beliefs means we aren't wrestling with ourselves in every conversation we have. We can also make choices about where our energy is best used when we filter our activities through our beliefs. Looking ahead on the path, right along the path next to the lilac bush, you see a dark gray stone. This stone is self-efficacy. You know what you're accountable for. You know what you believe. Now you have to go into the world and do it. Self-efficacy is trust in yourself to be the change you want in the world. Embracing self-efficacy is knowing you have the power and it is the best defense when facing difficult situations. It's acknowledging that there are always choices, even when you don't at first see them. As you continue to walk down this garden path, you see a beautiful stone bench. As you prepare to leave the garden, you decide to sit and relax for a moment. You take an opportunity here to carry with you the joy of the experience, to hold on just a little longer to the good vibes of the garden. The bench before you is curiosity. The best way to build resilience is to stay curious about yourself, about your environment, and about others. Curiosity helps us maintain our sense of appreciation and wonder. Now that you know how to build resilience, how do we become leaders in our community that practice resilience and trauma-informed authority? Whether we know it or acknowledge it, we each have power. Most of us are more familiar with the times in our lives when we experienced a lack of power, often due to prejudice, oppression, or shame. We hold on to the experiences that have left us feeling off or hurt. I find myself thinking instead of the words of Eleanor Roosevelt, "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent." Resilience is about reclaiming our consent. I think about times as a woman I allowed someone to treat me as less than. As a young woman in chaplaincy, I often didn't feel at home in my authority. One day, I was visiting a patient in the hospital. We were having a wonderful time and conversation. In the middle of the visit, the patient's home church minister came into the room, and he immediately took over the visit. He rushed into conversation, and he quickly took out his communion kit. It became clear to me the minister was there to do something and not just to be there with the patient, his congregant. He asked the patient if he wanted to take communion. The man was a gentle older man, and he responded, "Yes, but only if you offer it to the chaplain as well." The minister seemed taken aback, and he stated, "I didn't realize you were a chaplain." I remember the joy I felt in being recognized by the patient and honored to be included in the ritual. Communion is not something I would normally take, but in this moment, I wanted to honor the patient and his advocacy for me. After the communion, the minister left. The patient smiled, this wide, genuine smile, and he said to me, "We used to have a female minister. I really liked her." 10 years later, the story still makes me smile. Authority and leadership are not taught so much as modeled. I also learned something that day about trusting myself. I realized I didn't need anyone else to tell me I'm a good chaplain or minister. I knew the care I provided was enough. Over time, my authority has grown, and I feel more comfortable advocating for myself and, more importantly, advocating for those in my care. Good leaders are resilient, but not hardened to the world. Good leaders have experience that moves them beyond sympathy and allows them to share compassion informed by empathy. Good leaders can transform shame and trauma into advocacy. Good leaders embody resilience. Victor's on mute still.
'tis a gift to come down where we want to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, to be in the valley of love and delight. When true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend, we shan't be ashamed. To turn will be our delight, till by turning, we come round right.
I believe we'll now have some closing words.
Okay. So my closing words today are from Alpha. I bent until I damn near broke. But that's the thing about resilience. It shows up just as your soul begins to cry and catapults your strength into overdrive.
And, now I would like to just issue a reminder. I'm doing a double collection this week. One of the collections is for the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee's project called Guest at Your Table, which provides funding for social justice causes in the United States and worldwide. And so that's something that you feel a passion for. We hope that you will make a contribution and either do it through Tithely, as Ramona mentioned, and put in somewhere in the text of your giving that it is for the Guest at Your Table program, or you can send a check within the memo line, Guest at Your Table, or just the initials GAYT. So that's one part of the donation. And then if you're willing and able, we would also appreciate a donation to keep the fellowship going. We still have to pay our utility bills and we have to pay our mortgage. So, and we have to pay our guest speakers. So with all that in mind, please be generous with your donations. I'll ask you to recite with me as we bless the offering this morning. Let this be an offering to sustain this place, which is so sacred to many of us, a community of memory and hope, for we are the keepers of the dream. And again, I apologize for doing the order of service a little bit out of order. Sorry about that. But at any rate, we are ready for discussion.
Holly, I like the idea of thinking of 5 things that we felt were essential or really important to us. It kind of helps you weed out those things that really don't matter as much in our lives or our day-to-day being. So I thought that was a very good exercise. Thank you.
Yay, I'm glad.
Kali, I'd like to thank you for introducing the concept of self-efficacy. I don't know that I've heard of that before, but you've sparked my curiosity. I think I know what it means and how to use it. Also, I really wanted to, there was a phrase that you used that was particularly, it stood out to me. And it was talking about the use of compassion that's informed by empathy. Like, I know that everybody knows what that means, but that was just, you know, it's a good thing to remember.
Thank you.
Yes.
I mean,
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Victor.
I was just going to say it's a particularly nice bridge from last month to this month.
Yeah.
I like thinking of self-efficacy because I think what I'm really encouraging in that wording is the sort of trust in yourself, that genuinely people have decently good instincts, and sometimes we lose momentum to maintain what we know is best for ourselves when other things enter our lives.
I'll jump
I
in here.
wanted,
No, go ahead.
I wanted to say, Kali, how lovely it is to hear your speech and your words. It is just like a warm little hug to my heart. And thank you for doing this. I thought the timing was incredibly appropriate. It's the beginning of a new year. Many of us are making resolutions. We might have already broken some resolutions. I kept mine very simple this year. And in fact, the self-care part of it goes in really well with my resolutions because I picked resolutions that go toward my self-care and nurturance, and instead of Catholic style rules like thou shalt eat more vegetables. You know, my mind kind of frames it that way. The words don't come that way, but my mind kind of frames those as rules I'm trying to follow. This year I had an approach that was more empathetic for myself, in making more nurturing goals instead of more self-critical, rigid rules. And I wanted to thank you for speaking so strongly to that.
Well, and I think, Sue, it's really important when we make goals for the new year that one of the things I really liked in this practice is like I said, is to treat it more like a meter and less like a pass fail, where it's like, oh, I made it 70% of the way there this week. Okay, maybe there's got to be a reason that I only made it 70%. And wasn't that 70% awesome? Instead of, I didn't make it, I failed. You know, when I look at, I literally have the self-care dashboard on my fridge and on my wall at work. And I look at it and I'm like, man, I have not done anything to encourage better eating this week. What the heck? But instead of saying, oh, I'm just going to get fatter, I'm like, oh, man, there was some really bad stuff at work this week. And I wonder how I can approach next week differently instead of beating myself up about it. So hopefully you can find some of that self-love in your own New Year's resolutions.
The other night at something like 2 a.m., I was thinking about the possibility of a resolution that was like, don't stay up past midnight. And it was interesting because at 2 a.m. I was like, you know, I don't think I can do that resolution because sometimes I have a need to stay up late because of like, I haven't gotten any time alone that day. And this is like the only way I have to have it. And it's still not what I want to be doing, but it is fulfilling something that I need anyway. Yeah. And I just thought that this exercise and this talk is really interesting because I think that really does, it sort of plays together. It's like, okay, I can't make that resolution, but I can keep an eye on it and I can see if I can approach things in a way where I don't need to stay up until 2 a.m. because that's not very fun. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Maya. Thank you for sharing.
Oh, I'll just jump in and say one of the things that I appreciated in your talk was the idea that we all have had experience of shame. And so we've all been traumatized to some degree. And we all have an opportunity to practice resilience. And in that awareness and that work towards better self-care, we may become role models for other people just by showing how we address our own challenges, our own trauma, our own hurts. Maybe that becomes inspiring for other people. So I just really like that whole way you frame that.
You know, it's interesting, Victor. I went to work for a few hours this morning before this, and I was reading something about 40% of individuals with intellectual disabilities have experienced trauma in their lives. And I thought to myself, no, it's 100%, because all of my individuals have been shamed at some point in their lives for who they are and who they were born. And I thought to myself, what if everything we did to care for them embraced some model of understanding that no matter what we don't understand about how they handle different scenarios or situations, there is trauma and there is need to care for them in that. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna talk about this in an hour. But you know, it was something I really, when I heard that, when I heard Chaplain Hale say that, I was like, I watched it like again and again. I was like, oh my gosh, that just means so much to me.
Yeah. And not everybody meets criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder, but
right.
that doesn't mean you haven't been traumatized.
Exactly. And I think that's the point, is that it's not embracing models of care that acknowledge trauma are not necessarily trying to treat trauma, because somebody's level of trauma is really up to them to articulate. And exactly, Victor, people who have experienced shame or trauma are not necessarily someone suffering from a traumatic condition.
But they still hurt. We all still hurt. And we all need to embody the concept of resilience and to promote it in ourselves. Yeah, it's great start the year. Thank you so much for that.
Well, and I can think of 100 times when my willingness to admit my own hurt has brought me in relationship with somebody. And all it was admitting that I too am not perfect.
Yeah.
Other thoughts?
I have been thinking about shame lately, and I don't know if this is like precisely connected, but I've just also been thinking about shame as the fear of being kicked out of the group. And it's really interesting how powerful and scary that is, because I experience shame all the time, even with groups that I would say I'm not even really that interested in being a part of. There's still this fear of getting kicked out of them. So I don't know. I just think it's really, I want to think more about the idea that shame is trauma, and that shame for me is also that. Yeah.
Do you think sometimes, Maya, that we almost sell ourselves short because of our fear of rejection, that we don't even give people the chance to reject us because we're just so sure they're going to?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, this is something I find myself doing all the time, is like, okay, I'm going to kick myself out first, so you can't kick me out, because that would be too painful. So just going to stop the beginning and not deal with that, which is, counterproductive, but also a coping mechanism.
Yeah, it's protection, but it also is missed opportunities then, because you'll never know whether or not those people would have accepted you.
Yeah.
That's a really good example.
Is there something there about the inherent trauma and interpersonal struggles between co-equal members of a group, right? Like multiple people all striving to be in good relationship with each other is always challenging, because we have, each individual has their own needs and their own failings, and that somehow like an external authority who places themselves above the group, sort of usurps that ability to say, you are all traumatized by my presence as the authority. I don't know where that thought's going.
It's deep. Trying to think, Ian. Like systems theory, I think there's always some unofficial or official leader, right? You watch the dynamics of a group and you may not know you're the leader and you're the leader. You may strive to be the leader and you're overt about it, or someone may be the leader and is completely subversive about it. But it does change how everyone else in that group feels able to come and go into that group.
I really liked your exercise that you had us undertake, and that idea of this, you know, stone of self-efficacy that's, you know, setting there by the path. I thought that was really interesting because, well, I guess like in relation to this idea that in order to be resilient, you have to accept that responsibility for, you know, traveling through life and having to leave the garden at times. And maybe that's, you know, that like internal ability to be your own guide and your own leader it's hard, right?
Yeah. Well, and I love that. So I was worried about this sermon because I knew I was trying to do a lot of things. And I love that you guys just like went there. You're like, let's go on the walk. Let's see where it goes. And like, and I really enjoy, Ian, your ability to put that metaphor back together in a way that even I didn't fully see. That not only am I trying to talk about self-efficacy and resilience, but also like that safe space, right? The garden then becomes the safe space where you're inherently yourself. And then you have to leave it and still be those things.
Well, you've given me a great jumping off point. I'm going to go write my talk for next week.
Sounds awesome, Ian.
One of the things I'm going to do is think some more about my dashboard. I think I didn't feel like I had enough time to really give it the full time that it deserves to get to a place where I can develop a plan off of it. But you've certainly given me the opportunity to develop that. And I guess I'm also inviting other people. If you feel like you need more time to work on your dashboard, I think you should take it.
Well, and I fully encourage getting a pack of markers or crayons, because the first one I made, the one that's at work, it is colorful pictures, and it's playful, and it gets me out of my head and into that left brain that I ignore a lot. That's like, oh, let's draw and let's be creative. What are the images that come to mind when you think about self-care for yourself?
Other questions or comments for Callie?
Oh, Callie, you're on mute still. Or your mic's not working. Oh, Cal put it in the chat.
You appear to still be muted, Cal.
Yeah, I was trying to find unmuted.
There you go.
Do you want to put it in the chat? Okay. Hi, Katie and Matt.
All right.
And Sonia. Well, not Sonia, Katie and Matt. And your daughter. Please there.
Okay. I think we're probably good, don't you?
Yeah, I think.
Order after.
Let's give thanks to Kali for a very inspiring start to the new year.
Kali.
And with that,
I missed that we weren't doing fire communion. I was like, how do we do digital fire communion? So.
maybe we'll think of our chalice as the fire communion today.
Very carefully.
Very carefully. Home fires. That's challenging.
I will endeavor to leave the meeting open this week. I inadvertently pulled the rug out from under everyone last week, so feel free to stay on and chat with each other.
We